Welcome to Wizards, Warriors, and Words, a fantasy writing advice podcast.
Episode 2. The second.
We survived the first one.
We're still here. I'm Jed Herne, author of Across the Broken Stars.
That's me. Is it me? Is that me? I'm Michael R. Fletcher, author of the City of Sacrifice series.
Who's next? I don't know. I'll go next. I'm Rob Hayes. Which book should I pick? Author of, let's go with Never Die, because, you know, it's got combat and stuff, heroes. Anyway, Dyrk.
And a fabulous book it is. I should know, I wrote it. And I pretend to be I'm Dyrk Ashton. I pretend to be the author of the Paternus trilogy when it was actually written by Mike Fletcher and Rob Hayes. And there it is, written upside down. That's the third book in the series.
So today's episode is all about first chapters, how we can introduce our characters, hook readers, and start our story in the best way possible. I think we can go opposite order to last time. So Rob, do you want to discuss what you think about when you're approaching your first chapters and your process with that in general?
Okay. I tend to try to, in my first chapter, I tend to try to sort of introduce the world just a little bit. So you're sort of like, if there's like a major conflict in the world or whatever, you try to get that established a little bit off the bat, along with sort of maybe a little bit about the magic system. That can be very vague, something just interesting that really sort of like grabs the reader, so they can be like, ooh, that sounds interesting, I want to know more. I also tend to try to introduce at least one of the main characters, or the main character of the channel. I always feel one of the most important points about when you first introduce one of the main characters, or the main character, is you try to humanize them straight away. You give people a way to trying to relate to that character off the bat straight away. So that might be sort of like introducing them at their weakest point, or sort of that sort of thing where that give people something to root for that character, so some reason to root for that character. And then I also try to start the book with something either tense or actiony, that's something's happening, it's moving. Because the last thing you want to do is sort of like introduce the entire book with just, there's a bunch of people sitting around a table having a chat. It's not the most interesting. As we all sit around a virtual table.
Yes, the irony is profound.
Yeah, I have this whole like list of things. I don't actually have a list, it's all in my head because that's where I keep everything. But yeah, I have this whole list of things that I like to try to do in the first chapter as a way to try and hook readers in and introduce them to the world and the characters. Or in the case of Never Die, I just kill off my main character in one line.
Best prologue ever.
It is a pretty good start. Definitely sets the mood for that story like very well, which I think is another important thing, is to like get that mood across so that readers sort of know what to expect emotionally going through. And definitely Never Die, you want to prepare readers for some severe tragedy, so that's a good way to start it off.
It's a lovely, it's not grim dark, it's a lovely book about heroes and redemption.
Yeah.
Noble Bright.
Yeah, absolutely. It's noble bright. The heroes, they die, but they come back. That's the whole point.
They never die.
As angels.
Or ghosts, or zombies, or whatever. As long as they come back.
Exactly. Dyrk, what do you think about when you're writing your first chapters?
I haven't written nearly as many books as these guys, and they are both really good at first chapters from the books that I've read of theirs. Never Die, Rob's Never Die has an incredible first chapter. And Beyond Redemption has an incredible first chapter. I mean, there's no way a good chapter for me is a good first chapter is one where there's no way I cannot keep reading. And really great first chapters will actually can carry me through a whole trilogy, even if there's a lot of grueling parts in it. I think one of the most amazing first chapters is, good grief, I'm having a brain fade. Unlike Rob, I can't keep anything in my head, which is why I outline Stephen Donaldson's books about the guy who's a leper.
Thomas Covenant series, yeah.
Yeah, Thomas Covenant.
Lord,
I can't believe I didn't think of that. But that first
sorry?
Thomas Covenant. Thomas Covenant, the first trilogy. I was just blown away by that first chapter. Have you guys read it?
Yeah.
That first chapter is just amazing. And to be honest, that's a grueling series to read in a lot of parts. It's just really hard to read, a lot of whining and crying and some despicable behavior and characters I didn't really care about. And but I kept through it, and I'm really glad I read the whole thing. And it was honestly, that first chapter was so fucking good that it would carry me through that stuff, which is crazy, because those are big books, and 3 of them. But it carried me through the end because I wanted to know how it was going to progress. So I think about first chapters that really amaze me. Joe Abercrombie's The Blade itself has one of the best first chapters.
Yes.
I mean, these are ones.
With Logan Nine Fingers.
What's that?
That's the one with Logan Nine Fingers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry. Because he sort of it's him in a forest alone or something. The first.
Well, he's right. He's like it starts right in the middle of him trying to survive this attack by those whatever nasty
Shenka.
Creatures, and falling off a cliff, and talking about you can never have too many I mean, you really get a feel for that character and what this world is going to be like really quickly. And that one really comes. Roger Zelazny's first chapter in A Night in the Lonesome October is just amazing too. But there are a lot of great chapters. I read a ton of books that have great first chapters. So I'm really talking about those because I have no idea what I'm doing when I do first chapters. In fact, this might help this story. In Paternus, the first book, the first chapter now was originally the second chapter, even after, and that was the version that was a finalist and placed 3rd in the SPFBO. It was after that when I redid the covers that I actually swapped the first and second chapters, because it originally started with Fee and Zeke on the street. And then it went to Detroit with the Kabir chapter, with the bodyguard. And now those 2 have been swapped. And between changing the covers and swapping that, the people picking up the book from the look inside, I mean, it sales increased immediately. So those 2 things together, I think, made a big difference, because there was no action in the other scene. And it was long, and there was some info dumping, which I'm famous for. And in the first scene, in the other scene that's now the first scene, it's more of an action scene, and it sets up what kind of characters we're talking about. You get the hint that these are some ancient non-human characters as you go through that chapter. So I think that
a lot more urgency as well.
Yeah, it helps, and then it also raises the tension when I do finally get to the 2 young people on the sidewalk. Are they going to be attacked by something? And then you think maybe they are, but it turns out to just be her uncle's dog, who's really not a dog. So just
Knew that book was about dogs.
Not just a dog. And
It is a dog. It's just like a demigod of dogs.
A demi-dog.
Demi-dog.
In the first few versions of the book, that dog didn't exist. That character didn't exist in the book. So now I can't imagine him not being there. But so again, you can always add characters if you need them as you go along. It felt like it needed something. It needed that kind of character. So, and then I've started all the books differently. The second book starts immediately into some really weird dream shit, and then like an action scene in an airplane. The third book starts out much more slowly. Yeah, I really don't, other than read books and think about the books that you love their first chapters, and think about maybe doing a little slight emulation. That would be my biggest advice. Look at books that you think have the really great first chapters and try to do maybe the same sort of thing. Not exactly, of course, but I think that helps, especially with early writing, with new writers.
Mike, what about you? Do you have any other thoughts on first chapters?
I was lucky. I had a really amazing editor with my very first book, Ghosts of Tomorrow, which was previously 88. And she gutted it. I mean, she basically eviscerated the book. There was blood everywhere. And, was sort of like building up towards, and someday shit will happen. It's like, no. Page 1, shit's happening. The story's already started. Now, it doesn't have to be an action scene, but that is a good way to start. It's interesting. I tend to shy away from, I don't like to, my goal is not to info dump or to introduce the world, ever. What I want to do is every book is sort of a discovery, right? To me, that's sort of like part of the joy of fantasy is the discovery. And if I give it to you too fast, you're not discovering it. So I like to I'm just going to tell my story, and it happens in my world, and I know what my world is. You're going to get it. You're going to get all the little pieces as you go. By the end of the book, you're going to understand the world. But at the beginning, you're going to be like, what the fuck? You're not going to get it. And frankly, I'm fine with that. I don't think you need to know that stuff. I don't think I have to explain anything to you. You'll get it throughout the story. And by the end, if I've done my job, then by the end of the book, you will be there. But so my big one piece of advice is start after the story's already started. There we go.
I think that's good advice, particularly in fantasy, because there's a big temptation to info dump and like get the reader up to a full speed understanding of your world, when really they just sort of need to be there for the characters and maybe a little bit of the conflict to start things off. I think for me, I try to think about first chapters as like, how can you capture the story in microcosm? Like, how can you have a smaller conflict that kind of echoes the larger conflicts of the story's world? Or how can you show characters doing a thing that sort of echoes their larger arc as a whole? And like a good example of this is Along the Razor's Edge, like first book, Rob, that you wrote in the War Eternal series. Yeah, I put you on the spot there. Where the opening of that is the battle between the two nations, and there's like, I won't spoil it completely, but the way that you see the characters behave in that is constantly referenced over and over again in the series, because it is a perfect microcosm that captures the overall qualities of those characters and also becomes like a touchstone for their arcs moving forward. And I think that's a really good way to think about, how you can sort of foreshadow in a way what's going to happen by showing like a small version of it that's like a condensed part of your story.
I totally did that on purpose.
Dyrk, you have our book of the week. Oh no, sorry, Michael, you have our book of the week for this episode, or our featured book this episode.
Oh
yes.
Shit. Okay. So I'm going to introduce this book. This is Black Stone Heart. Oh, let's get the reflections there. It's not like a real copy because Amazon is being very slow to ship them to me. But anyway, so this is book 1 in the. Oh, he has a real copy. That's embarrassing.
Dyrk is holding up another copy.
So it's the first book in the Obsidian Path series, and it's going to be probably slightly misnamed trilogy. And it's a story about a man whose obsidian stone heart has been shattered and littered across the world. And as he travels across the world, finding the little shards of his broken heart, he regains some pieces of his past, his memory. And it's a touching journey of romance and self-discovery.
Also has the second greatest prologue of all time.
I wanted to talk about prologues, actually. What's our thoughts on those?
I love them.
Yeah, me too. You know,
I have them in every book.
Yeah, there are people that whine and cry about prologues or skip them. But I really think they're a small percentage of readers. And, you know, to say, don't do this, don't do that, this is bad, readers don't like this, readers don't like that. The fact is, anything is bad if it's not well done. And anything is great if it's well done. That's just all there is to it. You know, if you want a prologue, just make sure it's a really freaking good prologue, you know, and it puts attention.
I think too many writers, young writers, they'll write a prologue and that has kind of something obliquely to do with the book, and maybe it's showing you a different point of view of like the bad guy or something who's going to appear at the end of the book. And by the time you get there, you're like completely forgotten the prologue. And all you remember at the end is like the prologue seemed to have nothing to do with the fucking book.
Yeah.
Like if your prologue basically waffles and is like, I'm setting up tension, even though you don't know any of the characters or the world or the plot or anything, it's like, it's not going to work.
Yeah. The other mistake that they make is that they write a prologue that really could just be a first chapter. You know,
but I mean, isn't the first chapter? I've got it around somewhere, but I can't remember where. The first chapter of Game of Thrones, isn't that a prologue?
Yeah, there is a prologue in Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Yeah, but it does exactly what sort of like what Mike just sort of said. It basically it gives you this thing where it's like there's these characters who are going through the forest, and then there's like zombie things and all that lot, and then that's it.
And it gets really cold. It gets really cold.
But then like you don't hear any more about like the zombie characters or the whites or anything.
Yeah, they come back in like halfway through the first book, which is like 7,000 words.
So I think that sort of goes to prove your point in a way, Dyrk, which is just like if you do it well enough, it works.
Yeah.
Even if it shouldn't.
Yeah, but I've heard people rave about that prologue.
Exactly.
They love it, so
it's better than starting with Bran. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think that's probably a good time to wrap up this episode. Do you have any other final comments before we close this one out?
Prologues, Mike? Anything?
No. I wrote a prologue for Beyond Redemption, and then the editor said, "Why don't we just call it the first chapter?"
Always a solution.
And I was just saying how great that first chapter is in Beyond Redemption.
And I think a benefit of focusing on first chapters as well is you can kind of check them out for 40 books and not have to spend 8 hours reading every book, because you can just sample those initial couple of chapters and learn some lessons from them as well, if that's what you're curious in. All right, so thank you for listening to this episode. We will see you again next time. Thank you for listening to Wizards, Warriors, and Words. We hope you learned something useful. Let us know what you thought about this episode in the comments below. We'll do our best to respond. We'd also love to hear your questions. Comment with your questions below and we might even answer it on the show. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like this video. This helps more people discover the show. Wizards, Warriors, and Words is jointly hosted by Dyrk Ashton, Michael R. Fletcher, Rob J. Hayes, and Jed Herne, with editing by Jed Herne. Our music comes from Michael R. Fletcher, and our artwork is by Felix Ortiz. Thank you again for watching. Now go and write extraordinary stories. We'll see you next time.